Thank you, everybody, for taking your seats so quickly. That's really wonderful. My name is Dr. Carol Bond, and I will be your MC for today. I wanted to remind you that we are running a raffle today to raise funds for Rotary Club of Melbourne projects, which go to help a number of different communities in need. We do have a slide up so you can see what we have on offer today. We have a Penfold Grange Vintage 2008, which is supposed to be an exceptionally good year. We have a Zen Chardonnay, bottled by Tony Bish in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. We have, and this is very special, the Rotary Gala dinner tickets for 2 persons at the Plaza Ballroom on the 1st of June. Now, the Rotary International Convention is going to be in town from the 26th of May and run for a week, so you'll see a lot of Rotarians around Melbourne. And it would be really fun to, if you were the lucky winners of the pair of tickets to attend the gala dinner. We have a very generous offer from the Hotel Sofitel, 1 night for 2 persons, valued at $600. And we have a wilderness outdoor wear voucher worth $250. So tickets are 1 for $20 or 3 for $50. There are people up the back with machines that we take credit cards, and please feel free to get up and make a purchase and support the work of Rotary Club of Melbourne. And at this point, I would like to introduce you to our president, Adrian Nelson.
Good afternoon. In the spirit of reconciliation, we begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. In particular, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, on whose land we meet today, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as extending that respect to all Indigenous Australians present here today. We recognise the traditional owners' continuing connection to the land and waters, and thank them for protecting this coastline and its ecosystem since time immemorial. In doing so, we recognise that Rotarians and all of those present here today have much to learn about environmental sustainability from the traditional custodians of this land. Members, visitors and guests, a warm welcome to our 2nd annual World Environment Day lunch. This meeting is our 41st meeting of this Rotary year and meeting number 4,984 in our 102-year history. And we're so very pleased to have you all here today. We have here today special guests forming our panel who you will meet shortly. They are Lord Mayor Sally Capp, Professor Usha Iyaraniga from RMIT, Rotarian Bob Glindeman from Donations in Kind, Indigenous architect Ruben Berg, our moderator Jill Risley, and iconic Melbourne restaurateur Adam De Silva and Sofitel General Manager Clive Scott. Please join me in making them welcome. We have wonderful representation from our community, including environmentally conscious Rotarians from around our city, our event supporters, ESRAG, the City of Melbourne, Vic Mortgage Group, the Sofitel Melbourne, and Team Global Express. Now, just last night, Team Global Express won the Australian Logistics Council ESG Award for its introduction of 65 electric trucks, which is the largest fleet in Australia. Congratulations to you. Now, again this year, Rotary Melbourne has engaged with students from a number of schools and never cease to be amazed at the awareness and commitment in the environment and sustainability. The youth of today are indeed our future. We are delighted that Melbourne Girls College are represented today with 2 students and a teacher. Melbourne Grammar School with 2 students and a teacher, the Melbourne Indigenous Transition School, or MITS, with their founder, Richard Tudor, and Colby Catholic College with 9 students and 2 teachers. Just on Colby Catholic College, having attended last year's event, they are now planning a Young People Plan for the Planet conference at the University of Melbourne later this year. Isn't this very exciting? Well done to you all. Now, as with MITS, Viewbank College was also involved, but curriculum schedule did not allow for their students to attend today. All schools have produced essays and videos demonstrating their involvement, and I invite you all to join me in acknowledging their dedication. We're also delighted that past Rotary International President Ian Risley and his wife Juliet could be here today. As Australia's first Rotary Club, the history and heritage of the Rotary Club of Melbourne is an important part of our fabric. Australia's first Rotary International President, Angus Mitchell, was a past president of our club. Royce Abbey of the Rotary Club of Essendon was also an honorary member of our club, and we acknowledge his contribution to Rotary International and Rotary in Victoria. The board of the Rotary Club of Melbourne has voted to confer upon Ian Risley honorary membership of our club, and we acknowledge his contribution to Rotary International and to Rotary in Victoria. This will continue the history of all Victorian-based Rotary International past presidents to hold honorary membership of our club. Ian will join other honorary members, including the Governor of Victoria, the Lord Mayor of Melbourne, Sir Gustav Nossal, and Nobel laureates Professor Peter Doherty and Dr. Tilman Ruff. We have admired the leadership he has shown and his ability to bring everybody working together to achieve great things in Rotary. In particular, as a lifelong environmentalist, Ian has led Rotary International's added global focus on protecting the environment to make the world a better place. We are in awe of Ian's significant achievements, and we are delighted to welcome him as an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Melbourne. Ian, would you please come to the podium to accept your citation? Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It means a lot.
Isn't that lovely?
Thank you. That's right. And Ian will also offer his remarks on Rotary's focus on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is a great honour, and I appreciate it very much indeed. As Adrian said, the presidents of Rotary International that have come from this fair state have had an association with the Rotary Club of Melbourne. I'm always pleased when I go to significant clubs in other cities to remind them that the Rotary Club of Melbourne was first. And in fact, next week, the Rotary Club of Brisbane will be celebrating its centenary, which is very exciting. And I will again remind them that the Rotary Club of Melbourne was first. And there's a lot to be said for that, particularly when you remember that in fact, the intention was that the peripatetic Rotarians who were chartering clubs around the world went to Sydney first, and it was closed. So they came to Melbourne and chartered the club here. I do congratulate this club on the leadership that they've provided for the environment over the years. It's entirely appropriate because of the status of this club that you should be leading the way, as past RI President Bill Boyd once said with his theme, we need to lead the way, and you are doing just that. I particularly admire the net zero emissions for meetings, which are really good, your support for Second Bite, which is a wonderful organisation, your promotion of donations in kind, and lots more. It shows that you care and you are providing leadership. It took a while for Rotary to recognise the environment in a formal sense with our 7th area of focus. Now we have real traction and we are going ahead to to make a difference. This is an exciting time for Rotary in this great city. Sally and Sally and I were together X number of years ago, I can't remember how many, when the evaluation team was here in Melbourne to decide whether the convention, which starts next week, should come to Melbourne or not. And if I may say so, Sally, one of the aspects that absolutely clinched it was when you took us all for a tram ride. That really got the Americans going, I've got to say. But Mr. President, thank you very much for this kind honour. I appreciate it very much indeed. Thank you.
I'd like to now call Clive Scott, Sofitel General Manager, and Adam De Silva, the genius behind the meal we're going to be eating today, to address us and tell us what we will be enjoying.
Bonjour everybody, and officially welcome to Sofitel. To President Adrian, Mr Risley and Lord Mayor Sally Capp, welcome, and to distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So Sofitel is delighted to be working with Rotary Melbourne. Rotary Melbourne meets in our hotel, which we are very proud of. And so when they come to us about something like this, doing with sustainability as a hotel, we're very pleased to be involved. Now, we've got a group of Sofitel people here, and many of us last night sat on an hour-and-a-half long Paris video conference last night about food waste, which is very interesting. So we have a great deal of attention in our company, and in World Hotels is a great deal of attention about food waste. And just to give you an interesting fact, it was discussed last night that 1/3 of food which comes into a hotel never actually leaves the kitchen. It's actually wasted in the kitchen worldwide. And 1/3, approximately, is what people don't eat. They put it on their plates, but they don't eat it. And that's an horrific fact. And when you look at not just what that 1/3 was, but the water that went into it, the gas that went into it, the energy that went into making it, etc., the time and labour that went into it, it's a huge waste in our society. So as a hotel chain, we are working heavily. So we're delighted to be involved in a lunch like this. And we ourselves, we're an ISO 14001 hotel, and we've always had an energy management system. And we are very interested in protecting the environment and improving it. Now I have here this lovely gentleman here. You'll recognise we both went to the same hairdresser. Right?
I purposely didn't shave today, so I didn't look like Scott. Or Shane Delia.
Yeah, Shane Delia, more like it. So Adam has worked with us on the menu today with our chef Edward Badger in the banquet kitchen. And you actually come from an Indian-Italian heritage, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yes?
So my mother's, well, I can't say the joke that I normally say.
Why? Is it
the top half's Indian.
Okay.
I'm joking, it's a joke.
Okay.
My mother's Italian and my father's Indian, but migrated to Melbourne. So I'm first generation, I call myself a first generation Aussie.
Who cooked at home?
My mother cooked at home.
And you and grandparents cooked as well?
Yes, yep. So I grew up actually, my nonna's house or property was actually fully sustainable because going back then they had the chickens, grew grapes, had full veggie patch, every fruit under the sun. And you pretty much didn't have to, if COVID hit back, 30 years ago, you'd be fine. You'd be fine because you didn't have to leave the house, leave the property. So, but yes, grew up around all, using every part of food wasn't wasted.
No.
So,
but it was just kept on being piled on your plate by Nonna. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Piled on the plate, and I grew up in a very multicultural. The kitchen table at home was very multicultural because there was always a bowl of rice and a curry and a bowl of pasta.
Well, very good. Excellent.
Believe it or not, and I thought that was normal. So going to school, I thought that's how everyone grew up until I started cooking professionally, and I was like, no. That's not how everyone grows up.
No. And you founded Coda and Tonka?
Yes, I founded Coda and Tonka.
Very successful restaurants?
Yes, right? yes. So I've been cooking. Actually, the Rotary Club, I don't have to say thank. I actually won a Rotary Club Apprentice of the Year award back in 1998. And they gave me a cheque for $500, so thank you, Rotary Club. And back then, $500 is probably worth $5,000 today. But so yeah, it was great.
And you put it to good use.
I put it to good use, and I love being called iconic and a genius. So I'm happy to come and do these events any day. Normally I get called other words, but
And now you're in the restaurant at the W Hotel.
Yes,
Lola.
I've got that as well.
If you haven't eaten there, it's a beautiful restaurant. Please go there.
Although I've done enough events here, maybe I should come and work at the Sofitel.
Well, you do a lot of events here, certainly. Yeah, we're glad to have you. Right, so the menu today, right, so we started, well, first of all, I'm going to tell everybody a part that Adam didn't get involved in, which was the cocktail you had outside. So the cocktail, it's called 3P Spritz. I actually said to Michael, our quality and risk manager, who actually made it with the chef, I said, it's not going to make me pee in the night time again 3 times, is it? Because I have enough trouble already, right? So it's actually pear, pink peppercorn and pepperberry. And the reason why it's there is that he went to the kitchen the day before yesterday when the chef was making the canapes, and there was pear stalks left over, and there was peppercorn, which they've been using in cooking, and some pepperberry. And he technically took all the scraps out of the kitchen, and he's blended them and boiled it and added sugar, and that was the syrup, and that was put into the drink and just with soda water on top. So everything is recycled, and then what you've done is then dried out and everything else that was left, and that made the leather, which was the garnish in the drink. So totally recyclable drink, which was very interesting.
That was delicious. Could have done with a shot of vodka though. Just saying.
Typical chef. Typical chef.
I'm just speaking for majority.
And then we had the canapé, which was the edible garden.
Yes. Yep. So obviously vegetables being the most sustainable ingredient used in kitchens these days. You know, it's very important. Like when I started my apprenticeship, started cooking professionally 27 years ago, there was no such thing as sustainability. That didn't even exist. I think everything went into the same bin. There was no recycling, and there was just, I guess, no care. I think we didn't really think about it back then. It was just get food delivered to the back of the kitchen and didn't really worry about where it came from. So
now we care about it.
Now we care about it.
Yeah, definitely. So the bread you've got on the table today also, folks, is that is flour from country Victoria, and it's got olives in it from the Grampians, and that was baked here as well.
Yeah, Mount Zero olive is one of the best olives, I think, in Australia, and it's a sourdough starter as well, so very delicious.
That's your Italian heritage.
That's my Italian, yes. Yeah. Well, yes, you could say I'm a chameleon. It depends who I'm talking to, depends what what cuisine I'm doing.
Okay, and now for main course you have a chicken dish. So why chicken, chef?
Chicken is the most sustainable protein there is. And we can use the whole bird, which we are today. So using the bones for the sauce. And it's, you know, it's obviously a lot better than aquaculture. I mean, that's another top can of worms that I really want to open up. But aquaculture has some positives and negatives. So, you know, chicken is the best at the moment and better than beef. But, you know, it's all about using suppliers and growers who are also aware of it, and so it gets passed through. You know, and I think as an older chef, to educate the younger chefs coming through about sustainability and using certain produce.
And chicken, of course, compared to cows farting, is actually less farting.
Yes.
I read that on the internet today.
Okay, all right.
That's actually what it said. I'm quoting that. Right.
Well, at least you can get eggs from. We get milk fed. Yep. Okay, I'll leave you. I'll let you hold that one. I'm not.
And now, then for dessert, you're having a beautiful lemon meringue dessert. Right? It's actually made with, again, free-range eggs. So they haven't been. There's no chemicals. There's no added to the chicken. They're just free-range. Just picking away at the dirt.
And everyone should have a lemon tree. Lemon trees are the best, and I guess that's sustainable because I think what makes a good lemon tree grow well? Does anyone know?
Yes, the cocktail, which was called 3P Spritz, yes, that makes it grow well. Right? Lemons are in season. There are some lemons in this today which come out of our chef's back garden as well.
And the rosemary, the herbs have been some organically grown.
Yes, definitely. And just to let you know, this menu is 2.9 kilo of carbon emissions today, right, which is actually quite low, and very low. And I'll tell you, it's about average for what our menus are at the moment in the hotel. Some of them are about 3.5, and we are able to do ones down about 1.5, but 2.9 is about the average. Now, changing the subject altogether from the menu, you've now gone on to open a gelato shop.
Yes, I have opened a gelato shop called Bocca Gelato in Ivanhoe. If has anyone been there? No one lives in Ivanhoe.
Oh, yes, there you go.
Oh, yeah, someone's been here. One person, thank you. Okay, there's another 150 people that need to come then.
Well, they're on the way.
But that was born in COVID, actually, a couple of years ago, born out of COVID. So, and we've had to, so it's been a great, it's a different, I'm diversifying in the business. So we actually use cows. We only use cow's milk. We don't use the other part of the cow. And we use sustainable practices there, like even down to our cups and our spoons and even our containers. We've had to change, no polystyrene. All the spoons are biodegradable. All the cups are biodegradable. So it's and there's minimal waste there as well.
Yeah, and speaking of cups, so today your coffee will be in a cup from Little Green Panda, which is recyclable cups as well. You'll be drinking today. So thank you, Adam, and thank you for contributing to the menu.
No worries.
And assisting Melbourne Rotary. And we hope you all enjoy the lunch that Adam has assisted us with, and enjoy the day, Rotary's environment.
Does anyone have any questions?
Ooh.
No.
He's a question man.
I'm not a question man, just in case someone wants a question. No?
Well, Adam will be around for a while anyway, and you can catch up with him.
No worries.
Yes, and we'll have his picture taken with you, because he's iconic.
I know.
Thank you very much.
And soon to be legendary.
Just to continue the food theme a little bit further, I've just been informed that there's, white wine and red wine on the table, but there's also a selection of Chardonnays and other wines and light beers. If you would prefer that with your meal, you just need to speak with the service staff. There's also soft drinks and so on, and there'll be tea and coffee with dessert. It's always my great pleasure to be able to tell you that the necessary rooms are out the door at the back and all the way down past all the couches. So please, feel free to use those as you need to. And then, of course, the Sofitel staff will let us know whether the muster point is, should there be a very unlikely event of alarms going off and we need to spring into action. So without further ado, I guess we're on to lunch. I have been asked to remind you that the event is being recorded because we have some spectacular panelists. But just for your information, we're not really doing much in way of the crowd, but just be aware that there is filming at the back. Enjoy your lunch.
Rotary International formally adopted protecting the environment as its 7th area of Rotary service in July 2021. The Rotary Club of Melbourne welcomed this development because we've been active in environmental sustainability actions for many years through multiple projects. These include reducing food waste through Second Bite, recycling manufactured goods through the Donations in Kind warehouse, and support for Rotary Melbourne Peace Park and periodic tree replanting initiatives. As passionate leaders with strong awareness of the importance of the environment and humanity, Peter Berg and Gary Fowler drove the formation of our Environmental Sustainability Committee, which began its work in May 2020. The remit of the committee is to enable the club to be sustainable by adopting best environmental practices in everything we do, to promote community awareness of the importance of protecting the environment, to measure and report carbon emissions generated by our operations to achieve carbon neutrality, and to create volunteering opportunities in projects that protect the environment. The Rotary Club of Melbourne aims to be the Rotary leader in environment initiatives. In this video, you will learn how we are achieving these goals, and I'll hand over to our Environment Sustainability Chair, Gary Fowler, to do this.
Thanks, President Adrian. With the committee's 3rd anniversary in just 3 days, I'll focus on our objective of being seen to be a sustainable club by adopting best practice environmental practices in everything we do and Rotary Park. Peter Berg will comment briefly on our volunteering initiatives and Carol Bond on creating awareness and changing behaviours through our annual Environmental Sustainability Awards and the World Environment Day event which you're attending today. Firstly, in order to be seen as a credible player in the space, we need to be seen to be promoting best practice in everything we do. So we conducted a review of all our environmental practices, and most importantly, we worked with ESRAG with the help of an international environmental consultant to develop a credible carbon calculator that can be used by any Rotary Club in Australia or New Zealand to calculate their emissions. This is now available as an online calculator and is being expanded for use in Europe and possibly US. We used the calculator to calculate our club's emissions, which were as illustrated on the overhead. We modified our meal options to reduce our consumption of red meat and encouraged our members to attend meetings using public transport where possible. Of course, the option of virtual attendance by hybrid meetings reduces environmental impact for those attendees to almost zero. We have for 2 years now offset our emissions by purchasing carbon social credits in With One Seed. This ensures that the funds used for offsetting our emissions all go towards improvement of the lives of villagers in Timor-Leste who restore the forests that generate the credits. We also continue to support the circular economy, primarily through the DIK store, of which you will hear much more today. A major project this year is the installation of peace bells at Rotary Memorial Park. This is a legacy project for the Rotary International Convention in May, and we thank the City of Melbourne for their support. The Melbourne Peace Park has an emphasis on peace, traditional owners, and the importance of protecting the environment.
Hello, my name is Peter Berg. Rotary Melbourne is involved in a number of environmentally sustainable volunteering activities that includes residential recycling of homeware items to welfare agencies by Ryman, the recycling of a variety of goods through the Donation in Kind program, working with Second Bite to distribute food waste to the needy, tree planting on the annual Planet Ark initiated National Tree Day, with Rotarians for Bees planning a Rotarian Network Volunteering Day at the Sweet Justice Beekeeping Farm, which complements the work Quinn Scalzo, a club member, is involved with in assisting the growth of the Sweet Justice operation. And Rotary Melbourne and Rotarians for Bees have proposed to the City of Melbourne the creation of a Rotary Pollinator Park on the transformational Green Line and been confirmed as a stakeholder on the project.
The Rotary Club of Melbourne is actively involved in promoting the seventh pillar of Rotary, which is awareness and protection of the environment. Our luncheon today is part of a coordinated plan to create awareness and understanding of the role we all play in protecting our beautiful Earth home. Our World Environment Day lunch is now an iconic annual event in partnership with the City of Melbourne and now with ESRAG, which is the larger Rotary Environmental Service Committee. In addition to the lunch, we have begun a Environmental Service Award. This is now the third year of our Environmental Service Award, where we recognize the efforts of businesses that make profit for purpose part of their mission. What we look for are people who are trying to make an environmental difference with the businesses that they choose. And we're very pleased to be in partnership with our past awardees and look forward to announcing our 2022-2023 awardee.
Hello, I'm Pat Armstrong and I'm the chair of ESRAG, the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. It was established in 2017 by a group of passionate Rotarians who are committed to protecting the environment. ISRAG has a very clear mission to inspire and empower the Rotary family with expertise, networks, education and best practices to implement sustainable and impactful environmental projects. ISRAG is a membership-based organisation with over 1,600 members from 90 countries and 320 districts. It's governed by an international board of directors. It works closely with Rotary International, the Rotary Foundation and other Rotary action groups. It increases its influence through collaborative partnerships with many environmental organisations. What does ISRAG actually do? Our main aim is to raise environmental concerns and share project ideas with Rotarians, Rotaractors and clubs across the world. We do that in all parts of the world through the inspiring work of 13 regional chapters. Globally, we communicate about environmental issues and Rotary environmental projects through its website, newsletters and its virtual Sustainability Expo. We educate through webinars, workshops and training courses. We provide practical solutions and ideas for projects through its task forces and initiatives. We provide valuable resources such as the new publication, the Green Events Handbook. We provide resources for programs of impact such as the lithium-ion battery recycling program. These resources can be tailored to clubs around the world. We also gather data on the impact of environmental projects and provide advice to clubs on global grant applications in the environment area of focus. So how can you be part of ISRAG? Simply go to israg.org and join this worldwide group of changemakers and influencers. You too can be part of this movement to inspire and empower the Rotary family to undertake impactful environmental projects. You too can be part of the environmental solution, and you too can influence other Rotarians and your community about protecting the environment.
Climate change action is a top priority for the City of Melbourne. In 2019, we declared a climate and biodiversity emergency to really bring a focus to our efforts and investments to make sure that we are mitigating and adapting to climate change. The City of Melbourne is taking action in many ways, but Power Melbourne is a lead project. It's absolutely key that Melburnians are able to access affordable renewable energy, and Power Melbourne is about these neighbourhood scale batteries being located across our municipality. And the beauty of that is that it makes available renewable energy to all of the small business owners and residents that cannot otherwise have solar panels on their premises. This is a project to install neighbourhood batteries to address neighbourhood demand so that our community can be powered by 100% renewable energy. Well, it's part of our big overall vision here at the City of Melbourne that we are a city that is sustainable, but more than that, that we are proactive in the solutions that really drive that transition to renewable energy. For us, those aspirations reflect the demand and the expectations of our community. And I'm so pleased that the City of Melbourne represents a community that cares so much about the future of its city.
Donations in kind, particularly this store at West Footscray and stores like it in other states, is all about saving goods from landfill. Effectively, everything that you see in this store would have found its way into a rubbish tip at some point, and it's still capable of being used. So it's a classical example of the circular economy at work. Hospital beds that would otherwise go to a metal recycler are finding their way to hospitals in Africa or in Timor or in the Pacific Islands. where they have another full life ahead of them, really working with the people in those countries because they need them quite desperately. That's very true of the hospitals in Africa. We've seen the reports that come back from the recipients of these beds, where if the beds had not been delivered, they'd be sleeping on the floor. That's not a particularly good situation for somebody who's recovering from surgery or illness at all. That's certainly the case with hospital equipment, and it's the same with school desks and chairs. Many of those school desks and chairs have been recovered from schools that have received budgets for new furniture, and they would have found their way to the tip if they'd have not come into donations in kind and had another new life in Timor or in the Pacific Islands, also in Africa. Today we've got 15 volunteers working at the store. 10 of them are filling a container going to Tanzania to a school project over there for a Rotary Club, and that container has 60 double desks and 120 chairs and a variety of other school equipment as well. So you can see that it's across the whole spectrum of medical, of education. We also send obviously computers and clothing and things like that, and in the case of the clothing, all of that is new clothing. There'll be end of line supplies, there'll be last season's stock, but the point of fact is it's all brand new. We're not just sending somebody else's used clothing to these kids in Africa, they're getting new clothing. And that's one of the delightful things about donations in kind. It's a classical example of the circular economy at work. It's supported significantly by the hospitals here in Victoria, by retailers and manufacturers and importers of clothing, and certainly it's well supported by the Education Department in letting schools know where they can get rid of their desks and chairs when they're going through a budget upgrade. This is a good location to avoid paying gym fees, because what we're doing is lifting boxes and beds and desks and chairs all the time. But the real payoff is when we get the letters and photos back from the countries that receive these goods. The photos of a hospital ward in Somaliland or Ethiopia or Uganda being transformed, I should say, from what is basically a pretty grotty room into a fair dinkum hospital ward. Seeing the smile on the kids' faces when they're sitting on a chair at a desk where previously they were sitting on the floor. They're the things that really make working at Donations in Kind worthwhile.
I come to Donations in Kind because I enjoy the work here and it feels like I'm actually doing something to contribute.
Hi, my name is Ushai Raniga and I'm professor at RMIT University in Melbourne. I'm going to be talking to you about sustainability in the built environment. This issue is more urgent now than ever before. We've had international programs and agreements such as COP26 that have discussed about the importance of climate and a future for all of us, particularly the younger generations who are going to be the decision makers of tomorrow. So what is sustainability? Sustainability essentially means protecting our planet. It means that we need to think about not just what is going on in the planet now, but how are we going to keep our planet for next generations of people living on this world, to be able to get resources, to be able to get water, to be able to get food, to be able to have a lifestyle that is very similar to what we have today. And I think it's pertinent to say that COP26 has shown that it is not possible for one part of the world, i.e. the people with money, the developed world, have got access to technology, have got access to materials, have got access to resources, while leaving behind the developing world. It is really important now, more so than ever before, that we ensure that the resources are there not just for the people who can afford to pay for these resources, but also for the people that cannot afford to pay for them. Beginning to look at how materials could be reused into buildings, and materials could therefore become or come to a point where we're not having to mine virgin materials to make our building blocks now, but we can actually use the existing built environment in the form of urban mining to be able to use these materials over and over again. So we now see that a number of governments in Australia, particularly the state governments across the eastern seaboard, New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, South Australia, and even Western Australia and Tasmania have now jumped on the bandwagon of circular economy, and circular economy policies and programs have been set up across all these different states and territories. The value of circular economy to Australia was estimated to be $26 billion. So the business proposition, if we move to a circular economy, is quite simple. You can continue to still produce and do the things that businesses normally do, but in the process of doing so, they can also continue to make money and they can grow their businesses. Here in Australia, we're not that far away. We have got, yes, at a state level, we've got different circular economy policies and programs across the different states. And no two states are exactly at the same point, but we're turning things around here as well. For instance, in Victoria, in 2019, there was an issues paper on circular economy, and in 2020, the new plan of action came into effect. We've also got the Circular Economy Business Innovation Centre here, which is managed by Sustainability Victoria. We've also got now a new authority called Recycling Victoria that is going to work across both the legislation side of waste and circular economy, but also going to be assisting governments, businesses and industry and communities to assist them in their own journey towards circularity. Now that's a future that I'm looking forward to being a part of.
This is the story of how one community's dream to restore the land grew into an idea that can help repair the world. Like many in the Asia Pacific, the people of Timor-Leste already know the reality of climate change. Within living memory, the seasons have grown ever more unpredictable. Droughts more dire, storms more savage, floods more ferocious. And with nearly 70% of its primary forest now gone, every grain of exposed topsoil that washes down the mountains and into the surrounding seas takes with it the people's agricultural livelihood. In 2010, a group of concerned farmers began to turn the tide. One seed at a time, and it's as simple as it sounds. The farmers are growing trees and seeding ideas through Homusang Ida, with one seed. A community-driven carbon farming program that's as natural in its application as it is far-reaching in its potential. For in a tree, humankind already has the perfect way to remove carbon from the atmosphere, store it safely, and use it to regenerate the soil. Homusang Ida simply allows the farmers of Timor-Leste to put their trees to work for the good of the world, as they regenerate the land, restore the water table, and return biodiversity to the ever-expanding forest. For each tree farmers plant and nurture, they receive 50 cents per year for 30 years. In a nation where many still live on less than $1 a day, this can literally double a family's annual income. Money that is helping to regenerate and transform local communities with better farming tools, better housing, and better education for the next generation. To nurture this uniquely grassroots movement, the government of Timor-Leste, in partnership with the European Union, is building the legal and financial framework that will allow local carbon farming to thrive and serve as an example to the region and to the world of just what can be achieved. One man's dream with one seed is now one small nation's growing gift to the world.
At COB, we have many programs that allow us to promote sustainability, one of which is Science and STEM Academy.
Anything really there, not much have there.
Well, I think everyone knows what the world is going through at the moment, and most of this is adults doing, as this is their past mistakes. I think they could step up more and not just leave all the responsibility to the youth and Gen Z to do all this, and that they should at least try to do the small things which can really help us.
I think if the older generation were to educate us, the newer generation, about how our effects are like a straw on the camel's back and how it's just adding on every day. And maybe if we know what to do, we can finally make a change, stop the cycle.
Hello again, everybody. I want to let you know that our panelists are going to be joining me on stage in just a moment, and our moderator today is Jill Risley. So I will ask her to call up each of the other panelists in turn once she gets to the stage. Hopefully you've been enjoying some of this film that we've been running, which showcases the interests of our panelists as well as the schools and Rotary Club of Melbourne. Jill, if you wouldn't mind joining me on stage.
Thanks, Carol. I might invite the panellists up to the stage, as we might introduce them as we go. And I think we're keen to have a robust but informal discussion today. Just while they're coming up, I might make a couple of opening remarks. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're gathered and pay my respects. And thank the Rotary Club of Melbourne for pulling this panel together today. It's a fantastic panel on a really interesting topic. Had I known you were accepting honorary members of interesting heritage, I may have thought twice about accepting moderation, but the Risley nose lives strong, so I'm glad that you now have an honorary member in your club. Just to start, I thought I'd provide a little bit of context. So I'm sure we all understand the reasons to combat climate change, but today we were keen to also talk about the circular economy. At the moment, we're witnessing what could be described as one of the most radical transitions of the modern industrial age, and sustainability, climate, and the circular economy are at the forefront of this. So if you haven't heard of the term circular economy, I thought I'd just very quickly give you a description of what it is. So in our current economy, materials are taken from the earth, products are made, we use them and we throw them away. So that process is linear. A circular economy effectively decouples economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. And to achieve a circular economy, it's absolutely critical to us achieving our Paris targets to keep global warming within a 1.5 degree range. So why is this important? So the way we're using resources at the moment, put simply, isn't sustainable. Global resource use has more than tripled since 1970. Global material demand per capita has increased from 7.4 tonnes in 1970 to to 12.2 tonnes in 2017. And I thought, just to depress you a little bit more, I'd just have another couple of sobering facts. It's not just our use of resources per capita which is significant. Australians are some of the worst offenders per capita when it comes to the generation of waste, and there's a huge opportunity to improve here. So, for example, in Victoria, only 43% of food waste is recovered. And a really significant study of food, hospitality and retail outlets in Victoria found that only 3% of food was recovered and 97% of food went directly to landfill. So I know the Sofitel is an absolute leader in this space, so that's not the case here, but there is huge opportunity for us to improve. And the forecast for our oceans is also a bit bleak. In 2014, there was a 1:5 ratio for plastic to fish in the oceans, and by 2050, it's forecast to be a 1:1 ratio. There will be as much plastic in the ocean as there is fish. So we've got a bit to do on the environment and sustainability front. And so today, here with an esteemed panel to discuss the impacts, the opportunities for leadership with the environment and the circular economy. I'll introduce them now one at a time and invite them to make a couple of opening remarks as well. So Usha, we might start with you. Usha Ayaranga is a professor at the School of Property, Construction and Project Management at RMIT University. She is a widely acclaimed expert in sustainability and the circular economy. She's someone that I have on speed dial when I have a tricky question that I need to answer. She's widely recognised for her leadership and is co-leader of the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program at the UN's One Planet Network. Usha, I invite you to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Jill. So Jill gave you some facts and figures around where we are at today. I would just want to add one more thing to that, and that is that if everyone lived like the Australians did, we need about 5.5 planets to survive. That's our footprint on the planet. And we know that we've only got one planet to survive on, so it's really, really important that we look after this planet. When people talk about the circular economy, a lot of people get a little bit confused, and I would like to explain what the circular economy actually means. There are 3 principles that underpin the circular economy. The first one is about pollution and not creating any waste. So while the circular economy talks about waste management, it is not waste management. It is much more than waste management. It's about rethinking how we use products, materials, how we design things so that we don't end up getting waste. So the idea of a circular economy is to actually eliminate waste in the system. So we don't want to use the word waste. The circular economy is also about ensuring that products and materials are used over and over and over again. So when we have a phone or your laptop or cars, anything that we use on a day-to-day basis, we want to try and make sure that cars are used for the production of cars. When you buy a phone, you don't throw the phone away every 3 or 4 years, but you try and retain the phone and change parts of the phone that don't work for us anymore. And a good example of that is what the Japanese did with the Olympics, and they tried and recovered as many materials as they could from phones and other electronic devices, and they made metals out of it. The third important aspect of the circular economy is recognizing that we only have one planet. So we need to allow the Earth to regenerate. So over the last 200 years, all the things that we have done in terms of our production and consumption processes has been very much about a linear economy, thinking that we can continue to mine into the future, don't really think about the impact that the mining is having. So a really good example of a circular economy in the future would be where we don't need to mine virgin resources anymore. And whatever we have within the system, as much as possible, is retained and used and reused over and over again. So recycling is very much a small part of this equation of the circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Our next panellist will be known to everyone here, I'm sure, and it's our Lord Mayor of the City of Melbourne, Sally Capp. Sally is, as we all know, a tireless advocate for Melbourne and an extraordinarily hardworking Lord Mayor. She does so much to ensure that we remain one of the world's great cities, including your support of the 2023 Rotary International Convention, and I've heard the story many times of your efforts to ensure that we were the host city. She's also a vocal champion for multiple sustainability initiatives to ensure that Melbourne also remains one of Australia's most sustainable cities. So thank you, Lord Mayor, for being on the panel, and invite you to make some comments.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you to Adrian and everybody at Rotary for inviting me back. I'm here with members of our wonderful team from the City of Melbourne who are doing a lot of this work day in, day out, so it's lovely to have all of them here too. I think one of the great understatements of the day is yours, Jill, when you said after all those incredible and very disturbing facts, we've got a bit to do. We have got so much to do. But the great news is, and just listening to Usha, that many of those things are within our control. They're within our intellect. They're within our efforts and our resources to make a massive difference. And I really wanted to acknowledge Ian Risley in putting this on the agenda for an organisation like Rotary that literally exists in communities around the world and is able to influence and I think more directly manage these issues. So congratulations, it's so important. Just a couple of things from me, because we are an organisation dedicated to really big goals that have global impacts, like being a city 100%, using 100% renewable energy by 2030 and zero net emissions by 2040. That's our big targets that we know will have global impact, but the way that we achieve that is definitely local. At the City of Melbourne, we've reduced our emissions by 76%, and we're working now on the last 24, but we know that we need to be supporting, leading, standing beside, pushing from behind all of the organisations and individuals across our municipality, because it's only together that we're really going to achieve those goals. So I think that sense of working together, sharing knowledge, but also pushing and pulling each other is important. When I was here last year, we were talking about food waste, and I mentioned that through our FOGO trial, we had 23,000 households that had adopted food recycling, food and garden recycling, and that as a result of that, at that point, we'd diverted 1,200 tonnes of waste away from landfill, which was quite extraordinary. I can tell you today that we've just started our trials in high-rise, which is the big conundrum that is really difficult to solve, and we've added another 2,000 households through the trial, so up to 25,000 households, and we've now diverted, though, 2,400 tonnes of waste away from landfill. So people are becoming more proactive, and I'm sure you're seeing that in your households. And I mention that because wasn't lunch delicious? To Clive and Adam, thank you. And perhaps to Usha's point, when we think about the food that does go into our FOGO bin, we could probably ask ourselves, probably couldn't create something as lovely as that dish at lunchtime, but what else could we be doing with that food? So that's just an update on FOGO. A couple of other things that we're doing around the circular economy in the city. We've now got e-bikes going around the city collecting coffee grinds and food waste from small businesses, food being an enormous amount of the waste generated in our city, and bringing it back to our dehydrator that creates compost for our parks and gardens. So that's happening across the city. We do an enormous amount with water management and recycling of water, whether it's rainwater capture or it's grey water, and I think there's a lot we can do more there. We also are using recycled glass for our protected bicycle lanes. I love to be controversial at these lunches. I've said bicycle lanes. And we're using recycled material. I also thought I'd mention a new product that we're using on our roads for paving called Green Paveview, which is a composite of a number of recycled products as a way, instead of using more asphalt, actually reusing existing materials. So that gives you some examples of what we're doing, but we know across just our own procurement spend that there's a lot more that we could be doing.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We're also fortunate to have Bob on our panel, and Bob will be known to many of you as well as a past president of the Rotary Club of Melbourne. Bob is a volunteer leader at Donations in Kind, which we just saw an amazing video about on the screen. Donations in Kind recycles equipment and supplies and sends it to 33 countries around the world. So Bob, I'll hand over to you to make a couple of remarks.
Thanks, Jill. I was very pleased when past Rotary International President Ian spoke about Rotary's acceptance or decision to accept as a seventh area of focus the environmental and sustainability. Donations in Kind had been involved in just that same process since 1978. But we didn't call it a circular economy then, it was just called stopping it going to waste. And I think it's grown enormously in that period of time. You saw some of those shots on the screen of the warehouse at West Footscray, and you think that in that 5,000 square metres of racked storage, everything in that store previously would have gone into landfill. Some of it might have been recycled, but most of it would have ended up in landfill because people were too lazy to think what else they could do with it, rather than just toss it in the rubbish bin. We've found over the last little period of time a much greater knowledge, recognition, interest in what happens at Donations in Kind, as an example, because people are more conscious of it. We know the people that we're dealing with want to talk to us more about what they can do with the stuff that they can no longer use. They don't want to send it to the tip because it costs them too much money. So how can we utilise it, save money, at the same time put it back into the business somewhere? And most of our stuff goes back into the business overseas. It's not happening in Australia so much from our perspective of Donations in Kind, but certainly majority of it will end up in a country overseas, the Pacific Islands, the African countries and the like. Whilst I'm not involved with it specifically, there are 3 other Rotary projects that are very much into the circular economy, and they handle all of the domestic furniture. I mean, Melbourne is a strange place. If you've got something to get rid of, you stick it on your footpath and somebody will take it away. It doesn't happen in many other cities, but it happens here in Melbourne. And people have a lot of fun going around looking at other people's nature strips and seeing what they can find. But the fact of the matter is now there are 3 big Rotary programs that are stopping a lot of stuff ending up on nature strips and finding their way into people's own homes where they're needed, particularly after things like bushfires and floods and the like, where the Western Emergency, Eastern Emergency and Inner Melbourne Emergency Relief Networks organisation are recycling an immense amount sorry, I shouldn't say recycling, should I? I should say repurposing an immense amount of domestic furniture that would otherwise be stuck on a nature strip and probably end up in the tip.
Thanks, Bob. And I've been reliably informed that the adjective is someone, or it's a verb, who takes things from the side of the road is called wombling, and I assume it's named after the Wombles back in the 70s. And Reuben, Last but not least, we're really fortunate to have Reuben Berg on our panel. Reuben is a proud Gunditjmara man from Melbourne, and Gunditjmara territory is down near Warrnambool, beautiful country I believe, and he's a member of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. Reuben uses his skills, his enthusiasm and his passion to share his Aboriginal culture and heritage, and it's wonderful to have you here. I'll let you say a few words.
Thank you. Nyata, Nyatuk Gunditjmara, Nyatu Nyatlinyong Reuben Berg. As was said, my name's Reuben Berg. I'm a proud Gunditjmara man, and it's a real pleasure to be able to be here today with you on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples. I've had the good fortune of being able to work in this space around considering this concept of sustainability for quite some time in the work that I've done, both with the work that we're trying to progress through treaty here as the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, and thinking about how there are decisions being made about our lands and our waters that are probably best made by First Peoples themselves, so trying to progress those conversations. But also in the work that I'd done previously as a Commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder, and seeing what was happening with our water within our environment and how much we had neglected our rivers and our waterways for so long, and how we've finally realised that they're valuable things, not just for moving things up and down along. And when I reflect on those things from an Indigenous perspective, I always find it kind of intriguing when there's this conversation around a sense of a discovery about sustainability and a circular economy, when really it should be seen as a rediscovery, because we've been doing these things as First Peoples for tens of thousands of years here on these lands. And one of the most powerful examples of that always comes to my mind is something that's actually quite close to where we are here today. If you were to walk across the road over that way for about 200 metres or so, maybe 500, you'd come to one of the many scarred trees that we have here around Victoria. And a scarred tree is where bark has been purposely removed from a tree to make something. It could be used to make a canoe, it could be used to make a shield or a shelter. There's lots of different purposes for removing that bark. And if you think about it, if you wanted a canoe, one of your choices is you just go ahead and chop down a tree and make a canoe. Then you'd have a canoe, but there's no more tree. Well, our ancestors a long, long time ago worked out we don't need the whole tree to be chopped down. We can just take off these single sheets of bark to make our canoe, and the tree will still get to live. So to me, those are powerful reminders that sustainability isn't some newfangled idea. It's something that has been practiced, and I think it is really important to be able to acknowledge and respect that.
So we might just pick up on that. Indigenous Australians obviously have an ancient connection to the land. From an Indigenous perspective, what are you seeing with the state of the environment at the moment?
Yeah, I think obviously we've heard all the stats and figures as well. We're not in the best position that we could be. And I think there is a lot of things that we can continue to draw and learn from in terms of Indigenous knowledge of how things have operated across the thousands of years. There is some really positive change that is happening in that space. So when we look at fire management within this nation, there is a much greater understanding now that the traditional practices of managing the land through fire were very effective in suiting the environment here, and that we're bringing back and reintroducing those things, which is really quite powerful, as I said. But also around water, recognising that we can no longer just be using our rivers as just a transportation service. And when we look at places like up at the Murray River, oftentimes the river is essentially just seen as a highway to move water from one place down to the other place to get to the farms. And we can be doing a much better job of that. So I think if we had continued on the path we had been going on as a society prior to the last 20, 30 years, we would be in dire strife. We're still in significant strife, but I think it's slowly the society as a whole is coming around to recognising and viewing things from an Indigenous perspective, which I do have the hope that will lead to some much better outcomes that we can see soon.
Thanks, Reuben. As we mentioned before, we are seeing a really radical transition at the moment around energy and the circular economy. Usha and Lord Mayor, how are you seeing this come to life within your organisations?
So from an educational perspective, obviously, and I see some school students around here, which is great, we need to start thinking about the next generation of students and what we teach the next generation of students. We certainly don't want them to continue in this perilous journey of linear economy that we have been on. So I think that's really, really critical. They're going to be the decision makers of tomorrow. They're going to inherit what we leave behind tomorrow. So it's really important that they learn how to navigate their way and make the decisions that are the right decisions for the planet, but also for the people. So that's really important. The second point, I think, is, Australia with a population of 26 million, and you look at the rest of the world, and particularly where Australia is placed geographically across Asia. And so we're doing a lot of work across the Pacific Islands, of course, but we're also doing a lot of work with countries like India and China. And just imagine, 1.3 billion people, if they start adopting lifestyles that we have. So if every Indian and every Chinese and every Indonesian started adopting Australian type of lifestyles, it's just not going to be possible to have a planet that can support us all in the future. So it's really important to start thinking about those design decisions that we make today and how those decisions impact the future. So really need that long-term thinking, but just not in the context of our production and consumption practices, but also a big unknown in terms of climate change. And particularly in the built environment, the design decisions that are made today are locked in for 50, 80, 100 years. So really, really important for us to start thinking about, if you're building that bridge, does that bridge need to be a few meters higher than what would normally have been? Because we are not having 1 in 500-year floods anymore. It's more like 10 years or 20 years, 50 years. So, really start thinking about the impact of the decisions that we're going to have today and how that's going to be in the next 30, 40, 50 years.
I'll just pick up on the theme at a more granular level perhaps, and that's really to encourage everybody around behaviour change. At the end of the day, we are developing all sorts of new technologies. One of our programs at the moment around energy, for example, is called Power Melbourne. It's going to be an independent network of community-scale batteries about the size of shipping containers around the city to be able to disrupt and help that transition to renewable energy across the grid, but really to provide direct access to renewable energy for individual households and small businesses. 80% of our residents live in high-rise and can't have their own solar panels. And this project really came about because we want to encourage and support new technology development around batteries, for example. But really the motivation was that many of our residents in those high-rises that couldn't directly access renewable energy said, we want to be able to, you're going to have to help us. And that has led to a big new project across our city. I think when we're talking about the circular economy, many of the decisions that are absolutely imperative to getting scale in circular economy, to really driving procurement decisions that can support the circular economy, come down to human behaviours and decisions. We've got all sorts of policies at Town Hall about what we're supposed to do when we're making decisions and buying something, but so often those imperatives around circular economy get overlooked because a price is better or some other feature stands out, and I think we've really got to be more conscious and deliberate about our own behaviour change and also encouraging behaviour change in those around us.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor mentioned earlier around individuals taking accountability and responsibility, and so I just wanted to ask, I guess, Bob and Ruben, are you seeing a change in people's perceptions and people's behaviours at a grassroots level?
The short answer is yes, Jill. A lot of the goods that we get in donations in kind comes from public hospitals, public schools, as well as private hospitals and private schools. All of the medical equipment, school desks and chairs, where previously they were not conscious of finding another home for them, it's very, very obvious now that people are thinking more about finding somebody who can utilise something that they don't want. I notice it particularly with the hospitals with hospital beds. I mean,
They're big, cumbersome things. Previously, they would go to the tip, sometimes to the metal recycler, but mainly the tip, because that was the easiest way to do it. Now we get more conversations with the supply people in the hospitals saying, we've got this program to change hospital beds. We're going to do 100 over the course of the next X months. Can you take them all? Whereas previously that sort of conversation never took place. It was usually, we've had 100 beds changed, can you come and pick them up tomorrow? The answer was no, and because you can't do that, that's when they end up to the tip. So the change, I think, is very marked, particularly in those two government areas, education and hospitals, both within the government system and within the private system, that people are far more conscious of putting it to better use.
Yeah, I think absolutely we are seeing some of those changes in trends of how people are doing things on an individual level, and oftentimes the conversation I try and spark with people around that too is to see these sorts of sustainable practices at an individual level as essentially an act of reconciliation, of being able to connect with and respect First Nations peoples and their traditions by undertaking those sorts of sustainable initiatives. And I think it is really important at that individual level, and I think it's also important at the top level, the governance level. But I think oftentimes it's just as important that kind of middle level, that community level, that we can be empowering communities to have the information they need to make decisions that are going to work for them, so that at a more local level we can get some really powerful outcomes there. And that's not just about sustainability to me, that's across the board, and that's what we're trying to progress with treaties, to making sure that there is that decision making at the right levels, because across the board I think you see the best outcomes when people are empowered to have a say on the things that directly affect them, and working together as smaller communities we often get better results than just on our own or just with what is coming from over the top too.
Thanks, Reuben. And just because the Lord Mayor mentioned bike lanes, I figured we're up for a bit of controversy. One of the ways to get people to do stuff is just to legislate it. Let's just pull a hard lever. And we're seeing that around the world with places like France. So France has the most significant and far-reaching laws around the circular economy and waste and recycling. So to give you a couple of examples, they have banned the destruction of unsold non-food products. You can't send products to landfill because they're unsold. The introduction of mandatory repairability index on electronic products, and mandated drinking fountains in all buildings which are open to the public, just to name a couple. I'll just open it to the panel for whoever wants to pick it up. Should we be introducing new laws, or should we continue to rely on the coalition of the willing?
I'm happy to crack at it first. My short answer to the question, should we have more legislation, is no, because necessarily legislation doesn't solve the problem. We've got lots of legislation now. I mean, it's illegal to take drugs. There are some road rules, but we still kill people. They're all pieces of legislation that people avoid or people ignore. So we've got to be very careful in just putting blank legislation in. To me, the process is more education rather than legislation. And it's a question of where does that education start? Reuben made a good point. We need to know more about what has happened in the past and how that can be utilised far better. And we start with the kids in school. There's no doubt about that. They understand what is right and what is wrong relative to this particular question. I'm sure that as they grow, they'll influence their parents. We hear that often enough now about the influence that kids will have on their parents. I think that's a better option than pure legislation, Jill.
Well, it's going to be both. It's a very technical term in government land, carrots and sticks. And you try carrots for as long as you can, but you do need to have some sticks ready to go. We don't want to do that, but it comes down to behaviour change, and it really is a mix around decision making and whatever encouragement that takes, whether it's carrots or sticks. And I'll give you some examples. At the moment, we've got a project on the go around decarbonising existing commercial buildings in the city. Cities contribute 75% of the emissions around the world, so we really need to address what's happening in cities. Within the City of Melbourne, 66% of our emissions come from existing commercial buildings and the way that they are powered and the way that we use them. So this project has a lot of carrots in there, ways in which levels of government can assist building owners and tenants to move from gas to electricity, for example, change window treatments, look at other ways in which they're using their buildings. But another part of the policy suite that we are considering is actually differential rates. So if you don't convert your building, you will be paying higher rates, and that is to compensate the community for the cost of the gas and the impact on the environment. So that mixture of carrots and sticks is important.
I just add to all that I think if there is going to be some sort of legislation around these sorts of things, I would really hope that there was maybe some form of voice so that Aboriginal people could have a say in that legislation too.
Beautifully said. I'll give you the last word, Usha.
Thanks, Jill. I just wanted to say that I think everything has its place, so I agree with what has already been said. But I think also sometimes, though, that the legislation brings everyone to the same level playing field. So legislation and regulation is about the floor, it's not about the ceiling. So we do need the incentives, we do need the carrots to push people in the direction of the ceiling, and a lot of the out-of-the-box thinking that occurs in the circular economy space really needs to be encouraged. So we need to move away from being a standard risk-averse culture to doing a lot more innovation and experimentation.
That's a great place for us to end. We're strict on time, so over to you, Carol.
If you would all please put your hands together for our panelists. I'm now going to invite the panel to make their way back to their tables and leave Jill to wrap up our conversation. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to now call President Adrian back to the podium.
Well, wasn't that fantastic today? To all our panellists, to Usha, to Ruben, to Sally, and to Bob, and of course to our moderator, Jill, there's just so much for us to learn about the behaviour changes that we're all undergoing at the moment to make our way into this new economy, for the design decisions that we need to make into the future, and also how to balance that with the carrots and the sticks that we need to do to make that change that's necessary. So could you please again put a warm welcome to all of our panellists and to our moderator, Jill. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to conclude our annual environmental lunch. I'd like to thank our Master of Ceremonies, Carol Bond, for great work today. But more importantly, these events don't happen by themselves, and in particular for our club's Environment Sustainability Committee, I won't mention you individually, but what you've made this event, and I know how much work it's gone into it, I know how much the club's gone on at the moment, but you should be very proud of what a fantastic event that we've had today. So thank you to our committee. But importantly, to each and every person who's in the room, to each organisation who has supported the Rotary Club of Melbourne in this event, and particularly the students who are here today, your presence and your importance in actually making change to the environment, to actually listening about, in this case, the circular economy, to see what the future has in hold. It's the students who are here today who are going to be taking our hands and leading us into the future. And I can guarantee that the City of Melbourne that we're in 30, 40 years' time will be very different to the one we're in today, due to the work and the interest that you are showing in the environment today. So with that, I thank you. Please take your time and spend as much time as you need to here. Please join us again at any future Rotary Melbourne event. And those of you who aren't Rotarians, as we've mentioned a number of times, next week you'll start to see about 13,000 people from all over the world, most of them wearing this little Rotary pin, from every corner of every continent. And they're here for the Rotary World Convention. At the Melbourne Convention Expo, there's the Rotary World of Friendship, the House of Friendship. The House of Friendship is really Rotary's expo. It's free to non-Rotarians. Please come and see what we do. Please come and see what our partners around the world do, particularly in the area of the environment. We'd love to see you and for you to learn more about what Rotary does. But have a safe day, have a safe trip home, and thank you so much for attending.